All right, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick Strength and Power. I've got a couple of interesting stories for you guys today. The first story that I've got for you guys today, the New York Pro competitor list just came out, and Nick Walker already commented and said he's doing the show even though he's not on the list. Obviously, we know that. But the list, I was kind of happy to see that there were so many names on this list compared to some of the shows that we've seen recently, where we just have a couple of guys. This looks like a pretty stacked lineup. A lot of people participating here. Like I said, Nick isn't on the list, but he is doing it. So let's go through this list really quickly. Some guys that I wasn't sure were doing it, like Justin Rodriguez. Milan Sadek is actually in here. So you've got Christopher Berner, Tim Budashim, Tonio Burton, Vladimir Byruk, Angel Calderone, Mark Daughtry, Janarthur Duncan, Quint Beastwood, Martin Fitzwater, Ethan Grossman, Harry Harris, Dorian Haywood, Kyle Kujala, Yosef Kvetin, Emir Omaragic is doing it. I actually didn't know he was doing it either. Justin Luis Rodriguez, Milan Sadek, Stuart Sutherland, which is Beef Stew, and Christian Wolski. So a pretty nice lineup here. This is going to be a really interesting show. And then, of course, Nick Walker as well. And the New York Pro typically does have a lot of guys show up to compete, and I wonder how much of this was the increase of the prize money to $30,000 for first place. That's a pretty significant increase. So now that you guys have the full list, I'm curious to know what your top 5 predictions are for this show, because there's a couple names in here that I think are a little bit wild cards that we didn't necessarily know for sure were doing the show. Milan, Emir, Justin, those guys could be in the mix. Let's talk some more about some of the guys that are doing it. Angel Calderone Frias first, the 212 guy that's coming over to do open at the New York Pro. So he wasn't at the Pittsburgh Pro guest posing that we already talked about. But he was at a guest posing this weekend, and he was shredded for 1 week out. I would have really liked to see him on stage next to Nick and Martin at the Pittsburgh Pro, but we're going to see him on stage in a few days in New York just for a comparison of conditioning. But this is what I've been talking about with Angel. He was very dangerous in the 212, and while he's not the biggest guy in 212, and certainly won't be the biggest guy in this open lineup, he's got a dangerously consistent level of conditioning that he brings to the stage. And that's when these smaller guys beat bigger guys. Just ask Hadi Chupin. He's a prime example of that phenomena, and I think that's something that Angel could be able to do as well. But while we've seen Angel win an open show before, we haven't seen him in a lineup of this open caliber. There's some really good open bodybuilders in this lineup, and I'm really curious to see if he's going to be able to stand with those guys. I think he will. But even beyond that, if he's going to be able to beat some of these top-level guys. So Angel is definitely a guy I'm going to be watching that, like I said, he's not as known, he's not as talked about, he's not as big of a name as a Nick Walker, but I think he's a guy that's really going to be in this mix. And I feel like he's going to surprise some fans when we see these call-outs. I feel like he's going to be right in there. Now, let's talk about the main guy for a second here, the guy that everybody's talking about right now, Nick Walker, a lot of people's favorite to win the New York Pro. And certainly a fan favorite. He posted this back double bicep shot. And I got to say, as critical as I was of Nick's midsection at the Pittsburgh Pro, there's no denying that this is one of the best back double biceps in the game. He has a ridiculously gnarly back double. You know, people talk about how crazy Nick's arms are. And this is one of those poses where him having these crazy peaked biceps and these ridiculously big arms, this is one of those poses that just really shows that off well. Because a guy like Derek Lunsford, for example, fantastic back, one of the best backs in the IFBB. His arms don't look like this in the back double bicep. Striated, hanging triceps, crazy peak biceps. This is a gnarly, gnarly pose for Nick. But I want to talk about the guest posing as well, the Pittsburgh Pro, because we do have the HD footage now from Gilco. And this was the main thing that, to me, I thought really took away from Nick's physique at this guest posing, the midsection. In the past, I've defended Nick's midsection. Obviously, in transitions and in the off-season, obviously he's kind of always had a blocky midsection. But the thing that kind of always saved Nick was he was always able to control it really well on stage. And when he would hit a pose and crunch down his midsection, he had these really deep, defined, separated abs that were so crazy and deep that it really overwhelmed the fact that, yeah, in the transitions, he's got a distended midsection. But at this guest posing, To me, not only did his waist look bigger, but when he did crunch down and control his abs, to me his abs didn't look as deep and defined as they have in the past. He didn't have like that, as much of that wow factor when he did flex his abs. And that was something that in the past was my main defense of his midsection. I didn't see that here. And granted, I know this wasn't the actual competition. This was a guest posing, but it was also 1 week out. So when I say I thought Nick would be tighter, and I say I thought he would be sharper, that's the main thing. I mean, obviously we knew Nick Walker's a freak. His nickname's the Mutant. We knew he was going to come out, look big, freaky, ridiculous. That's Nick's thing. He's a freak. But for me, this was one of those appearances from Nick where I felt the midsection really was distracting from his physique. And I felt like in this, obviously it was a guest posing, but in this situation, I feel like it was an issue. And we know now that things have changed a little bit in the IFBB, especially with the attitude towards the midsection. I mean, it's literally in the IFBB rules now about the scoring that points will be deducted if your midsection is distended. That's like a newer addition to the IFBB rules that didn't exist prior. And I think it's something that now they actually do look at and they actually do deduct for. But look, will Nick win the New York Pro? He's a lot of people's favorites. Look, he probably will. There's some really good bodybuilders in this lineup. But I don't think anybody that's there right now, even as good as Martin looked, Martin hasn't been tested against the top Olympia guys. The guys here that have been tested against the top Olympians, and even some of them that haven't because they couldn't get there, these guys aren't top 3 Olympia caliber guys yet. Nick Walker is. He's already been there. So likely he's not going to get caught here unless he totally blows it. I think he would have to be pretty off to lose this New York Pro. And I think that dichotomy, there's a lot of guys in this lineup with a really small waist, and especially seeing, Nick next to Martin at the Pittsburgh show. Martin has a crazy V-taper. And seeing Nick's midsection next to Martin, 2 guys that are about to compete in a week. And then you've got Tonio, who's also doing New York, really small waist. Quint Beastwood, really small waist, crazy taper. I think in comparisons like those where it really, if his waist is blown out at the New York show, it's comparisons with guys like that that's going to make it look even more pronounced. Could that hurt him? Yes. Could it make him lose, I guess is the question. Would it hurt him enough? The midsection thing. I mean, I guess if you combine that, if his conditioning was off too, I guess it's possible. And look, I think if you go back to that back double bicep picture, his coach, Matt Jansen, gave a really good explanation for why Nick looked the way he looked. The stress, the travel, diet, etc. And just talking about how Saturday in New York, the day of the show, is what actually matters. And of course, that's true. Again, it was just a guest posing, but it was 1 week out. And I think I would add to that, the bigger question with Nick is not necessarily, is he going to win the New York Pro? Is he going to lose the New York Pro? Because I think he is going to win. I think the bigger question with Nick is if this midsection thing, which is what I'm focusing on specifically, if this is something that's getting worse and he's starting to lose control of a little bit, how will that impact him on the bigger stages, like the Olympia, for example? Will he be able to beat his last Olympia placing, a top 3 spot, this year? Does this physique get him into the top 2? I think that's the bigger question. Look, obviously I like Nick, and I know I was critical of him in the Pittsburgh video, but I like him. I like his physique. I like him as a bodybuilder. And I've always defended him because people have been saying this about Nick for years, about the midsection, blocky midsection, ugly physique, no flow, not aesthetic, stuff like that, etc. And I've always said, on the day of the show, he's able to contract his abs, control the midsection, and he's got those deep separated abs. My honest opinion, looking at the Pittsburgh video, it looks like it's gotten bigger, and his abs didn't look as defined. Again, put the caveat, not the actual show, it's a guest posing. But I was watching that Pittsburgh guest posing, and I found myself not able to defend the midsection. It was becoming too distracting of a part of his physique. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Nick Walker in New York, will he win? Nick Walker at the Olympia, will he place higher than top 3, or higher than 3rd, I should say? Let me know in the comments below. Now, next up in the news, let's talk about another guy that's doing the New York Pro, who apparently just landed in New York. This was his first physique update after he landed. and that would be Martin Fitzwater. You guys know I've been very impressed with what Martin Fitzwater has been able to do so far this year. I thought the Detroit Pro win, especially the finals version of his physique, was extremely impressive. And I thought at the Pittsburgh Pro, he also looked extremely impressive. And his physique was kind of in stark contrast to Nick Walker. They've got very different shapes, very different flows to their physique. And I think Martin is going to be a guy that's going to surprise a lot of people in New York, because prior to him winning Detroit, I don't think very many people would be having him in the conversation as a potentially top 3 guy in a New York Pro that has Nick Walker in it. I can clearly visualize Martin being in that top 3 call-out. And of course, he's not going to be as big as a guy like Nick Walker. He doesn't have as much muscle, but he's got a really well filled out, full round physique that's very balanced, very proportional, and relatively aesthetic for an open guy. Whatever happens, I'm really excited for this show. I mean, some of those guys I mentioned earlier that we haven't seen in a while and I didn't even know was doing the show, Milan Sadek, Emir, Justin Rodriguez even. These are guys that win shows. These are guys that have been to the Olympia. These are guys that they could easily be in the conversation too. I think this is one of the shows that I'm most excited for, since 2024 has started. Aside from the Arnolds, of course. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Top 3 predictions, top 5, whatever. And as always, I love you guys. Appreciate you guys. Nick Strength and Power, signing out. All right, guys, don't forget to click that like button and subscribe to this channel if you enjoy the content. Also, check out my Instagram at NickStrengthPower. My Facebook page, which is simply Nick Strength and Power. My secondary YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Vlogs, for vlogs and bonus content that you will not see on this channel. And consider subscribing to my third YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Pokemon, which is all things Pokemon and trading card games, completely unrelated to this channel. So if you're into that, give that one a look. And all links to merchandise and social media will be in the description box below. If you guys want a Nick Strength and Power t-shirt, that will be in the Shopify link below. Have a great day.